Hello and welcome to the Max MPS Radio. My name is Jan Frisse and today I'm joined by Dr. Mike Isotel, who was on the show before, I think pretty much 1 year ago. And I think it was my third podcast or so, and I'm definitely excited to have you back on again for another episode. I think our discussions will be pretty great, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. So I appreciate that you took the time out of the day again, and welcome to you. Welcome to the show again, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me, Jan. It's always a pleasure.
Cool. So before we actually dive into today's topics, I actually want to talk a little bit about your current process, because I think that's what a lot of people are interested in, and me as well. So you're currently dieting. So do you have any plans on competing soon, or do you just diet for just pushing it up again or something like that?
So I've gotten to those. So I'm almost 35 years old. I turned 35 in May, and I'm sort of thinking that for the next 5 years, 6 years, it's going to be a lot of competing is the plan if my health is good. Because I've built quite a substantial amount of muscle, and I'm close to filling out the heavyweight class. There's probably no point to going into the super heavies because that's just, I'm a little bit short for that class. But, I have gotten pretty good at getting big, and I have gotten successfully pretty big. And now I would like to switch my focus over the next several years to trying to get incrementally leaner and leaner and leaner. So what that means is every major cutting phase will probably end in a show, most of them anyway. And part of that is to just, might as well if you're that lean. And also, I'd like to get pretty good at competing and nail down the protocol and everything with peaking, because that stuff's really hard. It's a very, very tricky thing. So if you can nail it down, you can get a real good understanding of what's going on. And so what I'm doing right now is in August of this last year, 2018, I had gone up to 265 pounds and off season, and I've held that for about 3 weeks. And it was really hard. I had to take in mostly liquid meals. I had to eat 900 grams of carbs per day, which was really interesting. The good news is I lost like 30 pounds since then, and only in the last 5 pounds have I had a single craving for anything, because I was so over food that it would took 30 pounds off of me to even remember that I liked food. So in August I did that, and then I held that for a bit, and then towards mid-November, I dropped all the way down from 265 to about 245 to 250. And it was honestly 5 or 10 pounds of that was body water. It was the easiest diet I've ever done. The rest of it was super easy fat loss. And then so through the holidays, I maintained at about 245 to 250. And then so roughly around 245 pounds when I started dieting in January, like early January, first week, second week. And since then, it's been about 8 weeks, I guess. I've come all the way down to my lowest weigh-in has been 224 pounds or so, 225. So I've lost 20 pounds of body weight, which is a lot, right? So it's a hell of a percentage clip to lose weight at. Yeah. And, I would love to continue to diet at this pace for a similar pace for another 4 weeks. But unfortunately, for whatever it's worth, I have some travel coming up. So in 2 days, I leave to go to Hawaii for the first time ever. It was supposed to be for work, but work thing got moved. So it's just now for leisure. So I'm going with my wife and my friends, and it'll be fun. And then after that, I come back for a couple of days. My sleep's going to be all weird. And then I go to Finland for a conference, actually, to present with some of the RP crew. And so that 2-week period coming up, I'm going to be basically at maintenance for that time. I'm going to be eating a lot of carbs, keeping it mostly clean, and not gaining any tissue is a plan, but maybe a little bit, like gain a pound per week or something, half a pound. And then basically come back, and so in 2.5 weeks or so, I'll be back from Finland, back from travel, and I'm going to start a 6-week diet. And that 6-week diet is going to be very intense. It's going to be progressively calorically restricting. It's going to have lots of training, lots of cardio, similar stuff to what I'm doing right now and have been for the last 4 weeks or so. And, I'm starting the process for that diet will be starting at a pretty lean, right? I'm starting pretty lean. And 6 weeks of really hardcore dieting after you're already pretty lean, that's got to be pretty fucking lean, or whatever you call that. Somewhere in the 5 to 8% body fat range, maybe. It is difficult to estimate body fats here, but certainly something like that. And, if I look exceptional and I think like I look good enough to step on stage, I might do a show at that time. It's not so likely. I've had plenty of opportunities to do shows and look like shit, and I've taken them and I've looked like shit. So I'm not really interested in stepping on stage for any other reason than having a presentable appearance. And then either way, whether or not I step on stage, what I'm doing is after I finish the diet, I'm going to very slowly bulk through the month of May, June, July, August, so 4 months. And I only plan on gaining maybe at most 10 pounds of tissue, but probably less. So I'm really just trying to come back to the 8 to 10% body fat range and no higher, or not markedly higher, at the end of August, early September. In early September, the plan is, pending everything is going fine, to begin a 3-month diet or 12-week diet that will end sometime in November, and then I will almost certainly do a show. Because I figure if I start out pretty fucking lean at sort of 10%-ish, and man, I gotta be in something like show shape after 12 weeks, especially now that I work with Broderick Chavez of Team Evil GSP. My sports supplement side has been much more ironed out than it had ever been. And a lot of my early performances at shows have been because of the sports supplements were just all over the place. Who knows what the fuck I was doing. So I think that then in November, almost certainly we'll be competing. Cool. And then just to give a whole window of sort of longer term plans, I don't plan on exiting that 10% body fat range again, if I can help it, until I'm 40 years old. Well, probably never after that either, but I'm just going to stay within a striking distance of 12 weeks from a show at most times. And then I'm going to compete as often as I can and as reasonable for my health, so that I get lots of competition experience and hopefully try to do well. And more than that, just to get a little bit leaner every show, because as you well know, Jan, the first time doing a show, you can get lean, but there's something to multiple runs at a low body fat that gets you stupid, like John Meadows lean. Like, he's kind of my spirit animal, and I would like to see if I can get, like, really just dumbass, retarded lean and kind of become known for that, maybe, or kind of people be like, oh, wow, Dr. Mike, he's that lean asshole. Like, that would be really cool. It's very challenging, and I luckily I have all the muscle mass that I need, more or less, and I'll probably grow some more over the next couple of years, but I think that really just want to push the lean side of things and see how I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like a reasonable plan. And I mean, people now definitely saw that you can build muscle, and I think people just would really enjoy seeing you shredded, like really like in stage conditioning. And I'm definitely looking forward to what you look like then.
Yeah, I am too. I'm really looking forward to it myself, to be honest. And when you're motivated to be super lean, dieting's never that hard because it's always cool to look better and better.
Yeah, I think you obviously have like the variable in place that I or my clients don't have, since I think we just don't have the special sports supplement variable in there. So I think just from anecdotes from good natural bodybuilding coaches, it's mostly starting out relatively lean and having time on the side is probably doing a good job. And I can totally relate, and I'm definitely excited for you stepping on stage anywhere soon. So I also saw that you currently on Instagram, I actually saw one of your recent posts where you described that you're currently training your main muscle groups 3 times per week. And I would be super interested in what are the rationales behind that, how do you split it up, and how do you like it so far?
Well, I'm half a week into it, so I can't tell you how I like it so far. But the rationale is as follows. Used to be that we thought that per week, depending on how you split up your volume, didn't matter as much or very little. What mattered was the total volume was the same, and then you would get roughly equivalent results. And that's actually true in most cases, but not in all cases. Specifically, it seems that there is starting to be very good evidence. I would say maybe not compelling evidence, but very interesting evidence that there may be a maximum adaptive volume, to use my own terminology, at something like 10 working sets per muscle group per session. And that is per much of the aggregation of the research conducted by James Krieger, who I'm a huge fan of. If anyone signs up for the Weightology Research Review, it's the best fucking thing on this planet. It's amazing. I'm a paid so first of all, James and I are on very good terms. He doesn't pay me any money to say this. He doesn't pay me any money at all. I don't have a free membership. I literally, my PayPal auto-deducts every time I see my Weightology subscription every month.
Me too.
Gladly, I would pay double, I would pay triple for that thing. And the best thing about the Weightology Review, not the best, because there's so much good stuff in there. One of the great things is what he calls the Hypertrophy Bible, which is hilarious because it's not faith-based. In that, he basically has a summary of the hypertrophy research and volume, intensity, frequency. But he has updates to it all the time, and the updates are in-text updates, so he basically just evolves it over time.
Yeah.
And later we'll talk about the book that I'm currently writing about the hypertrophy training principles, and I would say that anyone who wants to really get ready for that book to get the most out of it, because it's going to be dense as shit, the Weightology Research Review, along with Brad Schoenfeld's hypertrophy textbook, is just two real good things to read. And I would say a third good thing to read is the Scientific Principles of Strength Training book. If you've read those three things really well and understood them, you're going to get the most out of the hypertrophy book that we're going to release in about a year. Because otherwise, you could read the book without having read any of those things, but parts of it are going to be real confusing. You're just going to have a whole lot of questions because it's designed to be a really advanced book, right? So that aside, so basically in the last summation of the evidence by James Krieger, it's really, we had seen something like this a couple of months ago. It's interesting how fast research is evolving nowadays, which is a really great thing. We saw some hints of this, and people, I had theorized it a long time ago, but this theorizing shit is the one thing. It's nice, but nothing beats hard data. Now we're starting to see pretty convincing data that if you go much over 10 sets per body part per session, so basically, what may be happening is this: like if you do 1 set per session, you get some growth. Do 2 sets, you get some growth. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then after 10, the growth kind of maybe plateaus, right? And it might actually decline. It will almost certainly decline at some point, right? But let's say it just plateaus for a while, okay? And then you ask, okay, we have 2 things, right? We have an insertion of disruptive energy into the muscle, right? The contractions, energy demand, substrate utilization, all that stuff. But we've peaked our hypertrophic yield. So the next question is, where exactly is that energy going? And the answer is probably to create muscle damage that is exceedingly higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, right? So this is where we get into a really interesting theoretical distinction between the difference between maximum adaptive volume and maximum recoverable volume. There is a reason that in my theory, or myself and Dr. James Hoffman's theories, theory model of maximum recoverable volume and volume landmarks, there is a really good reason why we say you don't ever want to train at your MRV for a while, because at your MRV is the most you can recover from, which means all of your body's systems are working on making sure you recover, and there might not be any room or very little room for actual adaptive processes.
Yeah.
So it's cool to reach your MRV one time for a good functional overreaching effect, but you had better be dropping after that. And the majority of your training is going to be pretty far away from your MRV, maybe like halfway between your MEV and MRV is where much of the golden zone of adaptation happens. So when we look at it from this perspective, if you say, well, I just want to train 15 sets per muscle group per week and split it up, let's say just twice a week, right? 30 sets. Well, 20 of those sets, right, 10 from each session, are going to go straight into hypertrophy. 5 of those from each session, 10 total, might go a lot more into creating muscle damage and fatigue than they do into creating hypertrophy. So you ask yourself a question like, gee, if I'm basically filling up my car's fuel tank and my car like just tops out at 10 sets of fuel, and then after that fuel just goes everywhere and has a chance of lighting shit on fire, why don't I just stop my car a bit more often and fill up only 10 sets each time? So there's the birth of considering the 3 sets per session situation, or sorry, 3 sessions per week. At that point, you can accommodate a much higher, greater weekly volume effectively. Now, people will say, and this is an interesting prediction that we're going to see tested in the research eventually, but hasn't been. People will say, the more frequency, the better, as far as training is concerned. Maybe. I think what is more likely, and we'll see if this is correct, is that your weekly maximum recoverable volume probably goes up a little bit if you just do more sessions and spread out the volume. But at some point, you hit that top end anyway. Right? It just like, this is fucking top end. You're just not going to, it doesn't matter how you split up the volume. It's just too much weekly volume. You just never recover. So whatever that MRV is at the optimal frequency, you have to choose enough of a frequency to make sure you can get up to that MRV. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Let me give you an example. Let's say your MRV for side delts is 30 sets per week, but you train side delts twice a week. Okay, and let's assume, just for simplicity's sake, that 10 sets is your maximum adaptive session volume for side delts. Is there any way to get the most side delt hypertrophy you can with just 2 sessions a week? 30 sets is your MRV. Nope. Why? Because you get to 30 sets, and all of a sudden, you're doing 15 sets per session to do that. So an extra 5 sets is just pure fucking damage, right? So then you say, okay, well, 30 sets, that means, what about training side delts 3 times a week? Well, that might be the case, that if you split up 3 times a week, you can actually get 10 sets per session or fewer every session. Now you're much closer to optimizing. And we can say, well, now that the sessions are smaller and the amount of total damage is actually less, maybe our MRV, if we do 3 sessions a week, is actually 35 sets, right? So then you're saying, okay, but I would need to do 12 sets, and that's a little bit over. So then there might be a little bit of an improvement going from 3 sessions per week for side delts to 4. But if you go to 4, maybe your MRV for side delts goes up to 40, 40, you're there. Like, that is your most economical optimal frequency. Now, can you go to 5 sets, 5 sessions per week? Yes. Will that increase your MRV? Probably not. Will it increase the quality of each side delt training session because you're more rested? Maybe. Although if you're pretty strong, the overlap of fatigue starts to get to you. So, for example, if you do heavy lateral raises one day and then the next day you have to do side delts again, like, oh man, I don't know. You might be pretty fucking tired, but you could do them lighter, but then you're burning your glycogen. And then next day you have to do them again. You're like, man, at some point you're just coming to the gym and you're putting in what we could call as more junky type of volume, right? You're not recovered in any sense of the imagination. Sometimes taking a little bit of a break is a good idea. So in that framework, I took a look at my own volume landmarks. And the thing is, for me, many of my volume landmarks are, my MRVs are in that 20-ish range, right? But some of them I think could be a bit higher than 20, maybe like 25, if I split it to 3 sessions a week. So I think maybe my back can handle a bit more than 20. Maybe my quads can handle a little bit of a higher MRV. Because remember, every time you add a session to a point, you might be able to raise your total weekly MRV. So I think I might just get a little bit more total weekly volume and higher quality sessions if I split up my training a bit more than I am now. Now, for me, because I'm I'm a very advanced athlete. I've been training for 20 years. I can't put in super hardcore sessions every single time I train for these large muscle groups, quads, chest, right back. They can't all be super duper heavy and super high volume. So there's quite a bit of variation in there. And per some of the recent data, which is theoretically just makes a lot of sense, and this will be included in the book, I think there's a very good reason for hypertrophy to train in a wide spectrum of repetition ranges. Now, whether you do that over the course of months or over the course of one session or over the course of the week is up to you. I think it's a very minor difference. But doing it in the course of the week offers some really interesting advantages. For example, if I train quads 3 times a week, what I can do is my first quad session can be heavy in the 5 to 10 rep range, let's say, just for convenience purposes. I stimulate mostly faster twitch fibers. I do a lot of tissue damage, a lot of tendon damage, right? That shit recovers, but it's not something you can repeat like the next day. Like if Monday you do heavy squats, a sets of 8, and you're relatively advanced, you just don't do that Wednesday. And you probably don't do it Friday either. But what can you do? You can switch to the repetition range working on another group of muscle fibers, potentially if fiber type wise. So maybe the next session, Monday you did sets of 5 to 10 super heavy. The next time you train quads might be Wednesday, and you may do sets of 10 to 20, right? You may be like some more leg pressing, some pre-exhaust kind of stuff. And then on Friday, you might do sets of 20 to 30, right? Because we know up to 30 reps covers the wide hypertrophy range. And then something you could do like walking lunges, squat drop sets, or something like that, right? So based on that, you basically have through the week, you're targeting all of the major repetition range classes, and there's, conveniently we can split it up into 3, the 5 to 10, the 10 to 20, and the 20 to 30. And here's the really good news. Your heaviest training day is on Monday. On Wednesday, your volumes are very high, but you're not training as heavy. So for example, if you hack squat 450 pounds for sets of 8 on Monday, are you going to do 460 for sets of 8 on Wednesday? No, and you might get hurt trying to do dumb shit like that because you're not recovered at a tissue level. But can you do 360 pounds for sets of 15? Yeah, totally, right? And you don't even really get super sore from from low repetition training. So you might not even be sore. You're just kind of tired and fatigued and axially loaded. But now it's a lighter weight, so you can just crank out the volume. And then you're pretty beat up by the time Friday rolls around. But can you do some walking lunges and super high rep leg presses or something for 20 to 30 reps? Yes, there's not a risk of injury because the intensity has dropped down, but the volume is high, and now you're training mostly your slower twitch fibers versus faster twitch, and that kind of offers you a really broad spectrum and the opportunity to manage some fatigue along the way. So the way I've been structuring my programming is basically for most of the muscle groups, I have dedicated heavy, moderate, and light days. Light doesn't mean easy. It just means higher rep and try to kill myself. And that way I am trying to keep, tendon and musculoskeletal injuries at bay, managing fatigue a little bit, but still hitting all the volume landmarks and making sure to do a wide distribution of fiber types and repetition ranges. So that's how I'm setting up my current training. And I think that with 3 times a week and there being 3 main ranges, it's kind of like a really elegant model. And we'll see if it works.
So you're kind of training parts of your upper body and your lower body together, right? In one session or at least on one day, right?
Yeah. So I don't know how much people can take away from my exact application because I don't have a day job, right? So I train 2 or 3 times per day if we include jiu-jitsu. If you include cardio, I train 4 times per day some days. So what I do is basically on Monday, I do chest and legs heavy in the AM. I do shoulders and some calf stuff, and I think forearm training, maybe forearms in the PM, along with some cardio. Tuesday, I do heavy rowing and heavy vertical pulling, and biceps and traps. Wednesday, I do in the AM more heavier hamstring. The hamstrings are moderate in the first day, but moderate range 10 to 20 reps for quads. And then I come back in the PM, and in the PM on Wednesday, I do like a tricep emphasis kind of push, and then some other ancillary side delts, etc. They get hit 3 times a week for sure because they can take a huge beating. And then on Thursday, I do moderate. So today I did moderate back instead of heavy back training, right? Some rowing and some assisted pull-ups and stuff. Biceps again, some traps again. tomorrow, Friday, the plan is to do, very high repetition, 20 to 30 leg work, and split AM PM with some more shoulder work and some more forearm work and so on and so forth. And then Saturday, I train mostly arms, so biceps get the first emphasis because they need more work and they prioritize the head of back. And also because back is sets of like 20 to 30 on like real squeeze and good contraction machine movements. So that shit you can do after biceps, no problem. You don't need to be fresh for that crap. And it's intentionally making back like really quite easy so I can recover to come hit back again super hard on Tuesday. So that's what my split looks like.
Sense.
And for someone who wants to do that, there's many, many, many different ways of splitting up the body. And this is like, to be honest, like I have no problem talking about my own training split. I don't like to do it on Instagram. First of all, because if you post anything on Instagram, it's just people look at it for a couple of days and then the post goes away. Like they have to search for it in your feed, which they never will. And they just ask you the same questions over and over again. So it's almost pointless to answer questions on there. But I don't particularly like to share my own training super often or make a big deal out of it because my training is just one way of programming that fits the theoretical boundaries for what is a good idea. And there's like 500 other ways. So I hate to, because people will just ask, like, I had one of the strangest interactions ever recently. It was on Facebook, and I posted my routine for the day, and I'd said, like, one of the things was, like, cardio, 300 calories. And the guy was like, what kind of cardio, did you do? Or I think he said, what kind of cardio? And I was like, like you can do anything that burns calories that you like to do. And probably lower intensity is better if you're a bodybuilder or something. So I wouldn't do HIIT, but, elliptical, incline, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no. What kind of cardio did you do? And I was like, who gives a shit? Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't know, whatever machine's free. Like, I do elliptical because I like the elliptical. You know why I do elliptical? Because I like how it's nice. I mean, I can listen to my music or I can watch videos or artificial intelligence. It's pleasant. I walk around enough through the city all day where I don't want to walk anymore. That's the fucking answer. But there's no science behind it at all. And this person was wildly interested with what I do. Like, who cares, right? Like, so, what I do in my routine is cool, but what really is like there's many, many ways of just constructing a program to say every major body part has to be hit 3 times a week or 4 times a week or 2 times a week or whatever. And what's really, really good idea is splitting it up intelligently and, getting ready to train multiple body parts in the same session, which has its downsides as well as its upsides.
Yeah, just like anecdotally, I can definitely say whenever I program any type of volumes over 20 sets per week, I usually also up the frequency, which will then lead to not having as high of a session volume and also to, as you said, like higher quality of work by just using higher intensities because you don't have to do that much sets, which will then lead to you backing off more and stuff like that. So definitely interesting. And I also...
Let me add something super quick I think the viewers here would really appreciate.
Hit it.
All right. So going back earlier, I said, if your maximum recoverable volume is a certain number, let's say it's very low, adding sessions per week can raise it, but maybe just very small amount. And then the adding sessions per week might not yield any benefit. For example, for very strong people, muscles like the chest or the hamstrings, especially muscles like that take a ton of eccentric load in most of the ways that you train them, I don't give a shit how many days a week you split up your hamstring training. You're only going to be able to put a certain number of sets into your hamstrings. Like, people who say my hamstring MRV is 30, I'm like, let me see how you do stiff-legged deadlifts. And they don't. They round their back. And I'm like, watch this. 3 sets of real stiff-legged deadlifts later. They're like, oh my God, I'm sore for 5 days. They're like, exactly. So for a muscle like hamstrings, training it 3 times a week, if you're sufficiently strong and sufficiently advanced, was almost like trying to squeeze it in where it might not belong. So for example, I usually do 3 sets of good mornings on average, right? Start a little lower, go a little higher. And I did 3 sets of good mornings the first day of this high frequency experiment, Monday, and I got so sore that by Wednesday when I was doing my moderate hams with leg curls, I was still sore, and I was like, no, this is stupid. And then I would have had to have done 2 sets of good mornings. Like, gee, that's very few sets, I'm already warmed up. I might as well do another one. If somebody could say, why don't you just do good mornings later? Like, for me to do good mornings, I mean, I do good mornings with like 125 kilos. I don't just show up and do them. That's like 3 warm-up sets at least, right? And You know how good mornings feel. They always feel shitty on the first set, and they feel way better on the second and third set, so on and so forth. So it's kind of like for some muscles with very low MRVs, I think it's just pointless to train them unless you're a weightlifter or a strongman athlete or a powerlifter and you want just super top sets. I think it's pointless to train some of those muscles with more high frequency. There's a reason for that. I think those muscles, because of their ability to take eccentric damage, that's one reason, but another one is they're predominantly fast twitch or faster twitch. Muscles that are not leveraged to take on a ton of damage and muscles that are slower twitch, for example, the muscles of the shoulder, have a really interesting thing. And you say, okay, why do we train those muscles more frequently? Well, we have two answers. One is they have higher weekly MRVs, so it's better to split up the volume like that, right? Because you get to the 10-set cap. Another one is the muscles recover very quickly from session to session, so if we're training once we recover, which is a good idea, we'd have to train them more often. But if you can tell, that's actually the same answer. The same reason, the slower twitch nature and the lower damage proclivity, that the muscles have the high MRV is also the same reason that they recover faster between sessions. Does that make sense? Like, it's the same root cause. So muscles that are not prone to taking a ton of damage during training and muscles that are slower twitch on average, they should be trained with higher frequencies for two reasons. One, they have MRVs that are so high you have to split up the muscle into multiple sessions because otherwise you'll exceed 10. And also, just because they heal every other day or every day and you're going to train them again, you need to train them again when they're ready. So that's kind of a cool observation, which leads me to think that, like, very advanced programming would be programming that I typically do, which is not every muscle group is trained with the same frequency. Certainly the same per session volume. Like, chest might be trained hard. For me, currently, this is actually still the case. I train my chest hard once a week. I train it a little bit less another once a week, and I train it just a session that's just very fast or slower twitch fiber oriented, very small volumes, another time during the week. Hamstrings, I train hard maybe twice a week, but with two different kinds of movements. Quads get trained hard twice a week, maybe third time is much easier. What about side delts? I train my side delts hard, currently 3 times a week. By hard, I mean I do 7 sets per session as a start. I mean, can you imagine training your quads like that? You would die, right? So basically, biceps, I train hard with 5 sets per session 3 times a week. So it's one of those situations where, the frequency that I'm doing per muscle groups is a little bit illusory. People say, oh, Dr. Mike trains, his back 3 times a week. Like, does he really though? He trains it super hard one of those days, pretty hard another day, and like minimally hard on the third day. So for me, it happens to work because it concords really well with that fiber type split, right? And because as a more advanced strength trainee, I have like multiple parts of my body I want to work on and sort of, various small muscles to hit. So I definitely wouldn't take my insight on the 3-day-a-week training and say, or 3 session per muscle per week training and say, okay, everything needs to be trained hard 3 times a week. You need to train everything hard as often as it can recover to train hard again. And for larger muscle groups, that'll be different than for smaller muscle groups. For slower twitch muscle groups, it'll be different. And for muscle groups that have positions in the body in which they're exhibiting or are basically prone to take a lot of eccentric damage versus not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually wanted to add as well that, like, from my experience, it's just mainly like side and rear delts, then probably biceps, and after that maybe back, traps. Then quads, traps. I don't really program that much isolation trap work.
Shrugs every day, be fine.
Yeah, probably. I find honestly, like, upper traps will get really hit by just doing like deadlift movements for most people.
I started training traps like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I had big ass traps before that.
Yeah. And yeah, probably that's it. And stuff like other muscle groups. I mean, there are exceptions from just inter-individual differences, but mostly I program like 2 to 3 times frequency, and then maybe on those body parts we just mentioned, like a 3 to 4 times frequency. Mm-hmm. I think I never went maybe on a full body on like a beginner client or something, but I usually don't have beginners, so I don't. I think I never ever did like a 5 times per week frequency. Sure. Maybe once or something, twice. I
will,
don't know.
I will tell you something pretty interesting. I'm not going to get too much into this because I want us to be exclusive. In London, during my Revive Stronger seminar with Steve Hall and company, my 2 talks are going to be, one, hypothetical or theoretical reasons that there is such a thing as too much volume per session, okay, per body part, which we covered pretty well here. The other one is going to be hypothetical reasons why there could be such a thing as not enough volume per session. I'll give just one of them, but I think I have a list of 6 or 7, and I'll save the other, 5 or 6 for the London seminar. Here's one. Let's say you're very committed to doing whole body training every single day. Let's say you're pretty big and strong. What is the ratio of the number of warm-up sets you do to the number of working sets you do? It's fucking awful. Imagine warming up for your quads and doing what's a good MRV for quads? 20 sets per week. So let's say you train 6 days a week, 18. So you do 3 to 4 sets of quads. Let's just say 3 sets of quads. And you're done. Okay. Then instead of just doing more quads, you got to warm up for back and do 3 or 4 sets for back. Okay. Then you got to warm up for chest. Then you got at least one warm up set for every major muscle group, probably more, especially if you're strong. Yeah, right? You don't just do a bunch of squats and then do one warm up with bent rows and then go into your first set. That first set is going to be garbage. Your chance of getting hurt is not pretty interesting. So I think that, so one of the reasons why there might be such a thing as a minimum session volume, certainly for optimality, is that you just end up warming up a shitload all the time. I've seen many powerlifting programs written before, and I've written quite a few thousand or something. Programs to me that are very interesting, if you do 2 of the lifts, like squat and bench, or bench and deadlift, or even deadlift and squat in the same session, that makes sense. You just warm up basically twice, right? You do some accessory work, which doesn't really take warming up, so on and so forth. I've seen many programs written where they do squat, bench, and deadlift in the same session. Holy fuck. This is the only question is, isn't there a better way to do that so that you're not just warming up forever? Yeah. What is the benefit of warming up that much? Warming up is almost technically, it's by definition junk volume. Right? So you're just, and what about efficiency? You're spending so much time in the gym. So when people say, hey, whole body routines are the best way to go, if you're someone who's weak enough to not need to warm up almost at all or barely at all, they're great. It's as soon as you start getting more advanced and getting stronger, they just become a huge pain in the ass. And one last thing I'll say, and this isn't actually going to be in the London seminar, I don't believe. As an advanced lifter, you have a lot of parts of your body to hit, and one whole body session we'll have to have some inordinate number of exercises to hit all of them. I mean, can you think about, you'd be like, okay, I need my rear delts, side delts, calves, hamstrings, glutes. At some point, you're either just washing them over with compounds and pretending the compound hits everything in the same ratio, which it doesn't, or you're just doing 10 exercises and warming up for all of them. It's a strange way to train, I think. Maybe not the most.
Yeah, and just for me at least, and from a lot of stuff that I heard from people, just actually training full body just doesn't make that much fun. I don't know. It's probably also because the reasons you told us. I think just warming up. I mean, my deadlift warm up probably takes half an hour or something.
Yeah, as well it should. Yeah. What do you do after that? You had better be doing more deadlift types. Imagine this. Yeah. Imagine warming up for deadlift and then doing stiff-legged deadlift after, and then doing some quad work after that. To warm up for quads, you mean your whole posterior chain, your glutes, your hamstrings are already warmed up. Your spinal loading is warmed up. Warming up for squats after you've done deadlift, like light squats or leg presses, is a matter of 2 or 3 sets. You're fucking golden. It's easy. But imagine having to warm up for deadlifts and then a next session warm up for stiff-legged deadlift separately, which takes just as much warming up, and then another session warming up for quad separately. Jesus Christ, and it just ends up being so much time. So I don't think it's the most efficient way to do things, for sure.
Yeah. And continuing with that, just out of curiosity, I mean, we're not even in the first topic, so I'm not sure if I should even ask this, but I'm just curious. And you told us that you nowadays train more into the whole rep range that is relevant to hypertrophy. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I remember that you were more on the side of periodizing rep ranges over multiple mesocycles in the past. What's the rationale behind that, and why did you change your opinion on that maybe a little bit?
Sure. So fundamentally for hypertrophy, there is one good reason for probably doing some distinct periodization of rep ranges, and here it is. The very high rep ranges, specifically when trained in a metabolite style, it has been shown that metabolite training is something you get used to very, very quickly. It just adapts very quickly. Your ability to sequester metabolites drops off within weeks. So while it is possible that you can do 25% of your training in the 25% of your training in the 5 to 10 rep range, 50% of your training in the 10 to 20 rep range, and another 25% of your training in the 20 to 30 rep range, if you wanted to focus on slower twitch fibers or metabolite growth effects and train 50% of your volume per week in the 20 to 30 rep range, or lots of drop sets, supersets, stuff like that, you can't do that every mesocycle. You might be able to do it for 1 for sure, 2 maybe, 3 is just going to be a whole lot of nothing. You're just going to be doing a lot of work. You're never going to get pumped. You're never going to get a burn. You're like, oh, great, I'm an endurance athlete now, right? And it has been shown pretty clearly that the metabolite sequestration and stuff just gets really, really good really fast, which is the opposite of what you want, right? Yeah. So in that sense, I think you can train with that split that I said, 25% in the heaviest weight category, 50% in the middle one, and 25% in the last one. You can do that indefinitely, but if you ever want to push the metabolite stuff, I think you have to periodize that for sure, right? In addition to that, there may be some benefits in just prioritizing one fiber type over the other in a given mesocycle. So while you may train all of the fiber types in the same mesocycle, you might do one mesocycle where 50% of your training is in the 5 to 10 rep range, faster twitch fibers are being targeted, 25% of your training is in the 10 to 20 rep range, and 25% of your training, or something like that, is in the 20 to 30% range, right? So biased towards the heaviest range. The next mesocycle might be biased towards the middle, 10 to 20, 50% there, 25 everywhere else. The last one, metabolite, might be biased 50% to the highest one and less to the other one, right? That's a very possible way to train. That is probably, I would say theoretically the best way. That's how I train. So when I say I do all the fiber types all at the same time, I do, but it's always biased to one or the other to some extent in any given month. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now, having said that, is it possible to just train like 33% or whatever, or 25, 50, 25 all the time and get 90-some% of your maximum gains? Fuck yeah. So this is like really just overcomplicating shit. And if it's worth it, but it's probably not for most people, right? So I'm an advocate of the periodization, but I think it's very advanced and should be used on an as-needed basis. If you've got great gains coming your way and you don't want to make shit too complicated, don't. Now, just a very specific point, because I've seen some of the stuff on Instagram too, people asking me the similar question. They've said, Mike, I thought you made your early part of your career yelling at people for violating specificity by training in 2 different rep ranges in the same week. That is exactly correct, because my early part of the career was focused on strength sport. If you are a strength athlete, you're a power lifter, and you have a week in which you do sets of 1, sets of 5, and sets of 15 in the same week, you're training wrong. Plain and simple. So this is, from, paraphrased from Mike Zordos himself, the DUP god.
Periodization god.
That's right. DUP is something like sets of 4, sets of 6, sets of 8.
Yeah.
It's not something like sets of 1, sets of 10, and sets of 30.
Absolutely.
So specificity, especially for strength power athletes, is a huge constraint, and that means you don't just train in random rep ranges. But for hypertrophy, remember, the strength training beneficial range is 2 sets of 1 to maybe sets of 10, right? That's a very small range. And if you do DUP within those, that's okay, but just not outside of them. But the hypertrophy range is probably 5 reps to 30 reps. And if you train within that, there's no problem.
Yeah, and I actually pretty like Zordo stuff, so cool. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I know you're time restricted.
I'll take one more topic.
Yeah, I actually have 3 topics, and I just want you to pick one that you think is the most relevant or the most that you.
Okay. Are you sure you don't want to pick for me?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I actually I have like the evaluation of delayed onset muscle soreness throughout the mesocycle, and how you actually look at the different types of soreness, and how do you then decide on programming in the future. I then have planning future overload, and last but not least, I have the stimulus to fatigue ratio. So
Cool. Those are all sexy fucking topics. I think I'll have to come back for another episode at some point.
Probably.
I can talk about two of them at the same time by talking about soreness evaluation in regards to its effect on planning future overload. How does that sound?
Great.
Okay. So the question is the following. When do we add sets? Because weight you can add to the bar in such small fractions that you can add weight sort of no matter what happens, right? Unless you just start underperforming, which we'll talk about. But the question is, you start at roughly your minimum effective volume at the beginning of the mesocycle. You sort of want to end roughly around your maximum recoverable volume. But a huge question that I get all the time is, like, how do you make the jumps, right? So the most straightforward answer, though not necessarily the most technically correct, is you just take your MRV, you take your MEV, let's say it's 10, there's 20 MRV, 10 MEV, and you just split it up, and you say we have 5 weeks of accumulation, and then just 2 to 3 each time, and that's it. Like, just add 2 to 3 each week. That's a fine way of doing things, but we can do better than that. So there's an algorithm that's going to be in the Scientific Principles of Training book, and it's not a very complex algorithm. I'll actually just detail it here, and it's just more formally written in the book, that lets you to decide when to add sets and when to not add sets. And here it is. You have to take a look at essentially just 2 things. One is your delayed onset soreness, or just soreness in general, and 2 is your degree of performance. So we have one scenario in which we can add volume. Okay? The scenario is the last time you trained a muscle. Let's say we train, to make it super simple, Monday and Thursday. Okay, super simple. Monday and Thursday, we train quads. We do squats on Monday. We do leg presses on Thursday. Cool so far? Cool? Is it just cool?
Cool.
Okay, sweet. Remember you taught me how to say cool in German? That was an excellent time.
Actually, it's still cool.
I know, but it's pronounced more cool. It sounds cooler.
Cool.
Cool.
Cool. Cool.
Cool. There you go. All right. So here's the deal. Monday and Thursday, we train quads. Monday, squats. Thursday is leg press. On Monday, we train squats. Let's say we do 5 sets. We evaluate on Thursday, when we do leg presses, 2 things. 1, how sore are we, or are we sore from Monday? If the answer is we are not sore when we're physically leg pressing, then that means we have recovered, and that is a very good thing. The next thing we evaluate is performance. Is our performance on leg presses at or above normal/expected values? For example, have you ever done a workout where you trained way too much volume in the one before it for the same muscle group, or way too close, and you show up for that workout and you just tank, your reps are fucking shit? You're like, oh, I was going to do 200 kilos in leg press, but nope, because that's a 5 at this point. So clearly your performance is under what it's supposed to be. A more technical way to put it is you have to violate your RIR goal to match your last week's leg presses. For example, the last week you had 3 RIR leg press. This week it should be 2 to 3 RIR, right? Falling RIR. And last week you did sets of 10, let's say. This week, to get sets of 10, you have to go 0 to 1 RIR. Clearly, you're not performing at normal levels, right? But let's say our first example is, in that leg press workout on Thursday, you both were not exhibiting soreness during that workout from the Monday workout, and your performance was at or above normal levels. You got through your workout at the RIR you expected, hit all your reps, and you're like, fucking golden. That means that you are recovering just fine, and you can add volume. So then what you would do, where would you add volume? Well, remember, the workout that Thursday evaluates is actually the Monday before it. Like, if you're like, oh, I felt great, and you add volume to the Thursday workout, well, that's just going to affect your Monday workout. That's a different evaluation. So because you recovered from squats, you weren't sore, and because your performance was not inhibited by squats, clearly the amount of squats you did on Monday was well within your ability to recover, And because you know that your body gets better and better at recovering as it experiences the same kind of volumes, you say, okay, well, next week it's probably going to take more to get to the same level. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to expand my volume. So next week, Monday, instead of 5 sets of squats, you do 6. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's it. So that's option number 1, is we recover both soreness, perception, and performance. Option number 2 is you're still somewhat sore when you work out the next time. So Monday we train squats, let's say 6 sets this next week. And then Thursday we do leg presses. And on Thursday, I'm still feeling the squats. I'm still sore. I don't know. That's not great, right? Overlapping soreness is a real bad idea because it just continually perpetuates muscle disruption and so on and so forth. You start recovering more than you are adapting. Bad idea. And also increases injury rate. So you failed the soreness test, but let's say your performance is good, okay? If your performance is good, then you're recovered in the technical sense, but clearly you're pushing your recoveries close to the limit because you're getting sore, so, overlapping soreness. And if you overlap soreness continually, you'll eventually stop recovering and your performance will go down. So you say, okay, because I'm technically recovered by performance, but because I got a little too sore, and I know that due to the, what the fuck is that principle called? Damn it, I always hated the term. Basically the ability to get used to, so the repeated bout effect. Right? You know that the same shit that makes you sore now, a week later, 2 weeks later, it makes you less sore. Makes sense? Like the same 6 sets or whatever. So okay, 6 sets in the squat this past Monday got me too sore because I didn't recover on time. But if I just repeat the 6 sets, it'll probably get me right where I'm going, right? It's not because you just increase the intensity by a little bit, who cares? 6 sets seems to be like it's going to be perfect that next week. So what you do then, so this is option 2, your performance is good, but you're still a little sore. You don't decrease your sets, but you don't increase them. So next week, Monday, you would do 6 again, okay? And then another option is you are recovered from soreness, okay? You're not sore, but your performance is down. Performance being down could potentially be you hit your MRV, but especially if it's in the first couple of weeks of training, it's probably not that you hit your MRV, it's that for some reason or another, you're excessively fatigued. So what you could do is if you notice that your performance is down, the next session you do could be a recovery session. You cut your volume in half or something like that, and then you get back on your normal plan with the same volumes you did before. The last option, option 4, is you were sore when you tried to train and you underperformed. At that point, you need some serious recovery time, and clearly what you're doing is too much. So not only do you take a recovery session in that next session, cut it in half in volume or something like that, and then proceed. But when you proceed, before you proceed, you don't just go back to the same volume. You don't go to sets of 6 on squats again. You go down maybe about 1/3 in volume. So you go down to 4 sets of squats, right, and maybe 4 sets of leg presses, and then you rebuild slowly from there. Eventually, if you hit a body part a couple of times, you take it up, and you have to recover, take it up, and you have to recover. Eventually you get so much systemic fatigue that you hit everything MRV, and then it's time to just do a deload. But I think once or twice in a mesocycle, it's okay to recycle a body part like that. So through that algorithm, we basically have a kind of no-nonsense way to figure out, should I be adding volume? Should I be maintaining volume? Or do I need a momentary break and potentially a reduction in volume? And it's all really technical, and I'm sure folks can listen to this a couple times through to get what I'm saying, but fundamentally it's this simple. Are you recovering well? If you're recovering really well, add volume. If you're recovering just barely, just add intensity, don't add volume. And if you're recovering probably not recovering, but it seems that it might not be too much volume, just some incidental stuff, then you just take a little break, right, a little recovery session, and then go back to your normal volume progression. And if you're clearly under-recovered and it's probably too much volume for you to sustain, you take that recovery break, you drop your volumes down by a good margin, and then you start working your way back up. Ta-da!
Interesting. And you again can correct me if I'm not accurate on that, but I think your opinion on delayed onset muscle soreness changed a little bit over the years, and I also remember that you told people that you should probably be healed the day before you actually train a muscle again.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will just, you will just recover barely into the session, but not having any time to adapt. I mean, you mentioned that before, somewhere before in the podcast.
For sure. My positions on delayed onset muscle soreness have for sure changed. And some of them have not. Here are my positions that have not changed on delayed onset muscle soreness. What has not changed is I think it's a bad idea to train while you're sore. I thought it was a bad idea a while ago. I still think it's a bad idea. It's okay every now and again, I think, but I've never met anyone who can consistently train while they're sore and make adaptations. It makes neither theoretical sense, the research doesn't back it up, nor does it make any practical sense. I've never met anyone who can do it. Usually the kind of people that say it doesn't matter if you're sore are like, you look at them and they're like 120-pound incels with like Japanese schoolgirls as their profile picture. Like, shut the fuck up. You don't even train, right? So that's the point I think I got pretty correct. What I don't think I got correct was I thought there was something magical to getting really sore. Still recovering, but getting real sore. I think there may be still a functional overreaching kind of effect there, which I think is why IFBB pro bodybuilders can train once a week and still seem to get pretty good gains. And I will say also, it's not just IFBB pros. For whatever it's worth, most natural pros train once a week, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew that, but Brad Schoenfeld's data on that, pretty convincing. Somebody who trains once a week or twice a week.
Doug Miller.
Doug Miller. Valentin Tambosi, who's a super, super smart guy, super educated, and he trains not so frequently for major muscle groups and fucking jacked, So I don't think we could say, like, we know everything there is to know about how advanced guys train, and then once a week is really stupid. I mean, I guarantee you Valentin Tambosi gets fucking sore. I mean, I've seen his workouts. I mean, he's getting fucking sore. He's growing, too. So I don't think soreness completely precludes growth. I think at some point, if you do too much volume, you definitely interfere with adaptation. So there is, in my current view, so I was wrong about max soreness as max results. I think I was wrong. So what I do think is more likely is that some soreness, or at least the potential to experience some soreness, is potentially instructive. So I'll phrase my views in the following way. If you have never gotten sore in a body part or seen your performance decline in it by pushing volume too much, you've probably just never seen your MRV, which, as we know from multiple studies so far, especially with higher frequency programming, your MRV could be way higher than you think it is. Right? Imagine what those guys in Brad Schoenfeld's 45-set study, or the Radaelli study, or the Hahn study, what they thought their MRVs were, if they even knew such a thing, before they did it. They're like, oh, congratulations, you did 40 sets of leg stuff, and you just grew. And they're like, God damn it, like, why the hell have I been doing 15 this entire time, right? So I think that if you've never gotten sore in a muscle group or experienced performance decline, you just don't know how far you could push it. You could benefit from pushing it further, right? So I would say that I think it's still up in the air as to whether the amount of soreness is irrelevant, or there's an optimal mid-range soreness, like getting a little bit sore but recovering fully with plenty of time to spare might be optimal, or it might be optimal to not get sore at all. But here's the thing. Let's say this is the point at which you experience DOM in volume levels. Let's say 10 sets per session or 8 sets per session or some shit. I think that up until you get to right here, at least, you're in suboptimal results. So maybe getting sore is already a little suboptimal, and getting even more sore is even more suboptimal. But I think everything up to when you get sore is a good idea. So for example, if someone gets sore only at 10 sets per session, but they've only ever trained at 6, and they don't get sore at 9, they almost do, I would almost always bet 9 sets would be more effective for them, just as a snapshot, than 6 sets. Because if they say, well, I don't know, I don't want to train too hard, I'd be like, why? You don't even get sore yet, right? Soreness, I think, if anything, if it's nothing else, is an indicator of, okay, if this is the point at which you're causing excessive damage. But anything up to excessive is probably incrementally beneficial. So I would say that you have to, you have to at least find where you get sore, and at the very least train pretty close to that at least some point during your mesocycle. I'm not going to say that you need to get sore, although maybe getting a little sore is actually optimal. I'm definitely not going to say you need to get maximally sore, but I think that getting plenty sore is probably not a that bad thing. What I will say is getting maximally sore all the time, probably a bad idea. But just the same, never having ever gotten sore and not knowing if you could train more without at least getting not sore but training more is also a bad idea. Why do I say this? When I came up, people were saying, like, delayed onset muscle soreness doesn't mean anything, doesn't matter if you get sore. Hey, dickhole, what if you're underdosing your volume by half? How the fuck would you know? At least if you're getting sore, you know you're fucking doing something. Something's, Here's another one. The mind-muscle connection only takes you so far. How do you know if an exercise is really hitting your quads like you think it is? How do you know if you're really hitting your biceps when you're doing curls? Well, you get sore. Like, it's unequivocal. Like, someone's like, hey, try this new chest variant. They're like, oh, I think it's working. Let me know if your chest gets sore. If it gets sore, like, you're definitely hitting your chest. Imagine this. Someone said, try a new way of flies. You do it. You do like 10 sets. Only your front delts get sore. Are you doing flies properly? No, clearly you're not. So I think there's a lot to get out of soreness. I'm no longer the opinion you need to push max soreness, but I think you need to at least get to that level where you get sore, and somewhere in that level, whether it be just below, at, or just above, when you first start experiencing soreness, is where most of the gains probably happen, or at least optimal gains.
Yeah, I think that was a great explanation. I kind of made like a little DOMS tier, like I made some tiers about DOMS, and I will just read them out loud, and maybe you can expand a little bit on that. Maybe they're just right on. So the first one would be not having DOMS at all, which is probably not the best thing, since a lot of like overloading variables are correlated with actually having DOMS. Then slight DOMS that heal very fast, which you should probably get at the beginning of a mesocycle. Then DOMS heal the day before a session, which should be probably most of the mesocycle. Then DOMS that are still slightly present into the next session but not affecting performance should probably only be when you're actually approaching overreaching, like last microcycle before deloading. And then the last tier that I created was like DOMS that are still massively present into the next session, and there decrease your ability to perform, which just probably means that you exceeded your MRV and you should probably deload and don't go as high next time. Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I can't tell you for sure that I think you're correct about that. What I can tell you with a high degree of personal confidence is that if you're wrong, it's not by much. So it could be that for example, James Krieger, the way he progresses in volume is if he's not sore, from what I understand, if he's not sore at all, he goes up.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
He might be right. What I would say is either James is right, and any soreness is already starting to be bad, or an earlier version of me is right, where soreness that heals right before the beginning of the next session is the best way to do things. But I will tell you this, very likely, those are the boundaries of what is correct, right? Your shit is right in between those, so I think you're fucking on the money. If James is completely correct, then maybe you were a little off, but not much. If old version of me is completely correct, then maybe you were off just by a little bit. But it's somewhere in that region. It would very, very much surprise me if you not getting sore, but doing even less than that would be optimal. That would be baffling. Contradicts all the volume research, by the way. And it would really surprise me if anything past debilitating soreness was a good idea, debilitating overlapping soreness. Let me make another really quick point of indirect evidence on the soreness thing. A lot of the studies that we've seen with volume indirectly test this, and here's how. It's been shown that optimal gains per session can be seen for roughly 10 sets. Roughly 10 sets. I don't know about you, Jan, but for me, 10 working sets per muscle per session gets me fucking sore.
Absolutely.
And it gets most people fucking sore, or at least fucking brutally tired, right? So to that end, there have been very few studies that have found either an absolute weekly volume that's low enough to not get people sore, or a per session volume that's low enough to not get people sore. So to put it another way, almost all of the subjects in all of these groups, in all of the volume comparison studies, they're getting fucking sore all the time. And probably the sorest ones also have the highest volumes, and they're growing the most, right? So that would be a real interesting theoretical blunder for the any soreness is bad camp, because it's a very interesting camp and they may be correct, but then they would have to explain the following. Who was more sore? Let's say in the Schoenfeld study, let's say in the Radielli study, let's say in the Hahn study as to when they did this and when they were sore and when they saw their gains. multiple other studies, the German volume study, so on and so forth. Who was more sore? The people that did the least volume or the people that did the most volume or the intermediate volume? And almost always it's going to be like, well, the guys that did the most volume got the most sore. Okay, how come they grew the most? Be like, all right, like if soreness really is that detrimental to growth, how come the people getting the most sore are growing the most? Like, interesting, right? It's a very interesting conundrum. Now, one of the interesting things about high frequency, to make a counterpoint, is that with higher frequencies, you don't get a sore because your per session volumes can be smaller, right? Which I think is a good thing. Yeah. But then again, it hasn't been illustrated that a per session volume of 5 sets is superior to a per session volume of 10 sets. And as a matter of fact, it's probably in that 5 to 10 range that optimality occurs. Anything less than 5 might not be as optimal as anything 5 to 10 per session, right? So then the next thing is, is it, so what is that indirect evidence for? It's indirect evidence for the fact that if you get super fucked up sore, it's really bad. Here's probably one of the best sort of indirect pieces of that for the studies. The Barbalho study from Brazil that was recently published, where they took females and trained them up to, so they did 5, 10, 15, and 20 sets per week per muscle group, but it was 1 session per week, right? Okay. They saw maximum adaptations, guess where? Between 5 and 10 sessions, 10 sets per week. They had 5 and 10 sets per week for females. It's fucking crazy. That's because they trained once a week. So then you ask the next question: how sore was the 5-set group? They got pretty sore, probably. How sore was the 10-set group? Fucking really sore. How sore was the 15-set group in 1 session? These are untrained people. How sore was 20 sets in 1 session? Can you imagine? They were probably they literally just had to throw them in the gutter afterwards, and were like, if you live, I'm back next week Monday because we got more sessions. Sorry. They turn to you at set number 18. They're like, am I okay? I don't know. Did you sign your waiver? They're like, we'll see. Hey, that's science. We don't know if you're okay. So basically, when people say hey, max soreness is a good idea, well, gee, those people in those studies, and there's multiple studies now, like I mentioned from Krieger's review, where they show that if you exceed much beyond 10 sets per session, hypertrophy goes down. That is pretty decent evidence indirectly for the fact that there's a level of soreness there that is just not conducive. I'll add one more thing and I'll shut the fuck up. When I was doing some training a year and a half ago, 2 years, I got really into doing leg presses for higher reps before squats, and I was having great workouts and I loved it. And I found some really good leg press machines. My wife was she was away. She was traveling in New York as a part of her medical residency, and she was stationed at this hospital, which I visited twice, and they had just a great gym. Just random great gym. You ever been to random place and you're like, what is this fucking amazing gym? And everyone there's just taking it for granted. You're like, you motherfuckers better not take this. Look at how great this leg press is. They had 2 different leg presses, Jan, and they were both amazing. I was blown away. So I trained there twice, and I trained at other gyms a couple other times in that mesocycle. And when you have a good machine and you're traveling, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fuck this up. So I did 5 or 6 sets of leg presses in the 15 to 30 rep range, right? And these are rest paused. And then I did 3 sets of squats for sets of 10 to 12. Yeah, and I got sore to the point where I was I don't know if I'm going to die or not. I could just die. Right? It was 2-day delayed DOMs, right? So the next day I was still fine. My legs were just weak. And then the DOMs hit, right? And then I would do another quad workout later in the week, but it would have to be really, really easy because I was still violently sore. I was tracking visually, and this was on a mass phase, and everything was great, post-cut. A couple of those sessions in a row, my quads appeared to be visually smaller. Now, for me to admit that is fucking painful, right? Because who the fuck trains for 3 weeks and their quads are small? And some of that was because we know that extreme soreness interferes with glycogen repletion, right? So they just weren't repleting their glycogen. But my performance wasn't skyrocketing either. And I wouldn't call that evidence, just kind of anecdote. And I've done this with multiple other muscle groups as well. I've trained my chest too much before. I've trained my back. Really, really high per session volumes that cause unbelievable DOMs, I think, are suboptimal for hypertrophy and potentially detrimental per that same 10-set cap, so on and so forth. And one last thing, just get your viewers their value for the money or whatever. One last thing. Anytime I see someone say you see the research of the 10 set max or 10 set cap, roughly, right? Roughly. You could benefit maximally from 12. It could be 14. It's just probably not 20, right? So people are like, man, just 10 sets, that's barely a workout. I'm just like, what is, like, this is clearly people who just don't know how to train. You know what I mean? Like, if your idea of a back workout is to do the fucking, like, chest support row, the third range of motion on the chest support where you just kind of shake it around, like, yeah, I would need 18 sets of that too to feel my back. But, like, if someone trains you properly, I mean, can you imagine a workout, Jan, where 10 sets for quads, 6 sets of leg presses, 2 from fail, sets of 15 to 20 reps, and then 4 sets of squats for 10s. God, you would die. They would have to wheel you out of that fucking place for chest, a single workout. Or, 3 sets of flies, 4 sets of incline barbell press, 3 sets of push-ups to failure with a wide grip. That's 10 sets. That's like, there's just nothing more you're getting out of your chest. I think you can't even get a better pump than that. Like, someone's like, I don't feel a pump. Like, if you don't feel a pump in 10 sets, you're just not getting a pump. And as a matter of fact, I knew a kid I used to train back in the day. He trained for like 3 hours per session. Don't ask. We'd be like, dude, what are your pumps like? He's like, I get a pump and then it goes away, but I'm still training. I'm like, oh my God, like, it's legitimately never happened to me. I think that's multiple sort of converging lines of evidence to the fact that 10 set-ish number, it just seems reasonable based on everything we know. So the 10 set maximum adaptive volume cap per session, from there, could be used for a lot of really intelligent things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I just did like 8 sets of quads like 3 or 4 days ago, and it was just like a absolute blast. It's like my last microcycle, and I'm even dieting, so my MRV should be a little bit lower. And like 4 sets of high bar squats and 4 sets of leg presses at 1 rep in reserve is...
Oh, that's it.
Stupendous.
That's exactly the workout I'm talking about, yeah.
I mean, I would be interested in how you actually, if you are approaching your last microcycle and you're approaching the highest volumes, especially for, I would say, like early to late intermediates who have probably the highest MRVs. Do you think there's anything in terms of like a cap when it comes to session length? Because I noticed that especially when I'm doing squats and stuff like that, and having like the longest lower body sessions that are in the last microcycle, that they can get pretty long. Just because you mentioned the kid that trained 3 hours, I did probably approach 3 hours for my lower body session this week. But with stuff like deadlifts and high bar squats who take like at least 30 minutes to warm up.
So I have a technical answer for you and I have a rough estimate answer. The technical answer is you have to evaluate your performance and metric your performance against other durations of workouts. So for example, if your workout is getting past 2 hours and you notice that anything you do past 2 hours can't compare to if you do it fresh, remotely, or if you under 2 hours, then you're totally like, it's just a bad idea. For example, let's say, and this is best with unrelated muscle groups. So for example, let's say you have trained your back with bent over barbell rows, right? And you have trained your back in the first hour of training, other muscle groups, whatever, let's say it's first, you have a certain level of performance. And then you have also trained it in the second hour. Let's say you did chest and legs before, and the second hour you did barbell bent rows, and you had a certain level of performance. Those levels of performance should be comparable. They shouldn't be miles away from each other. And you should still have a mind-muscle connection, get a good pump, and feel like you're doing some real work. If you do bent rows at some point at the 2 to 3 hour mark, and you're literally just going through the motions, and normally, let's say you do bent rows with 70 kilos, let's say you're using 30 kilos and you barely even feel it, because everything's so tired, you can barely feel your hands. You're like, I just want to get the fuck out of here. At that point, because you're not able to perform like you typically are, and you're out of your ability to perform in a productive range, then you have to say, okay, this session is clearly too long. The reason I give those performance metrics is the following. Some people can't train for longer than an hour, and they just shit the bed. Some people can train for 2 or 3 hours, and they're fine. They just don't accumulate a lot of central fatigue in an acute sense. In the workout, this central fatigue just doesn't go up much. With some people, it does. So there's that. But a rough guide is this. If you want optimal, if you want the best hypertrophy, the majority of your workouts almost all of your workouts through the entire mesocycle should not last longer than 2 hours. In the last week, if they're lasting 2.5 hours, fine. But if in the second week they're starting to last longer than 2 hours, you would be very, very advantaged splitting up your body into more sessions, plain and simple.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it just, for me, it's just my lower body, I mean, my upper body days, like I'm currently doing like a pull-push leg or pull-push lower body rotation 2 times per week. And my upper body days usually start at a good hour or something like that, and maybe got to 2 hours in the last microcycle. But my lower body usually takes me longer. I mean, maybe it's just that I'm doing more rest. I don't know. But I can, like definitely my performance is still going up and stuff like that. I mean, the thing that you mentioned with central fatigue, especially in first movements, get pretty high for me as well. So when I do I'm currently doing only 2 sets of deadlifts because those were like fucking myself up badly. And I did like 3 sets in my gaining phases, and now I'm doing 2 sets. And my central fatigue is pretty high after those 2 sets, but it then kind of gets lower again throughout the session when I do stuff that is not centrally as fatiguing, like maybe like even a stiff leg deadlift or like a leg press or stuff like that, and even isolation work. I'm like after 2 hours I feel pretty normal again, and I think stuff like intra-workout nutrition also then plays a more bigger role.
Yes, exactly. One of the best feedbacks we've had from RP when we started feeding everyone intra-workout shakes was these people were doing CrossFit for 2 or 3 hours. They were like, this changed my entire life. Like my performance is just unreal. And it's like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I can't believe you had been doing a 3-hour workout while just consuming water. I would just die right there on the spot. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a very apt observation. I will say this. This can be taken too far where you sort of wash out your weekly volumes and just do the same thing every day. But I think there's some good reason to take your biggest centrally fatiguing movements and just not put too many of them on the same day. For example, heavy deadlifts and heavy high bar squats, probably just don't do them on the same day. So here's a really cool option, right? Monday, you do heavy deadlifts and you do light hamstring curls and you do moderate leg presses. Easy. The workout doesn't take a ton of time. On Thursday, heavy high bar squats, heavy-ish stiff-legged deadlifts, and those 2 movements cover your whole body for hamstrings and quads. So on neither one of those days are you biting off too much more than you can chew. Because I've seen like a lot of beginners will write programs just on paper, and they'll be like, I'm going to do deadlifts, and then I'm going to do stiff-legged deadlifts, and I'm going to do heavy high bar squats, and then I'm going to do heavy rows. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you can call them heavy if you want. They're not going to be heavy. And that's probably another reason why body part splits are probably a little better for advanced athletes than whole body training. What are you going to do after you do deadlifts? Heavy. Not much. Right? You may be able to do the body part you already warmed up, like some stiff-leggeds, because you don't have to warm up for them really, some rows, and then you're just going to go home. But if you have to do that and you have to do like chest or something, it's either going to be very light or very easy, or it's not going to be much of anything at all.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Out of my 6 sessions currently, I think 3 are actually axial loaded, and 1 is heavily axial loaded by doing deadlifts and also stiff leg deadlifts. The others like maybe like with high bar squats, maybe like moderately axial loaded, and my easy bar rows probably also moderate or something like that. And I only as well do stiff leg deadlifts because I just can't do any more sets than 2 currently with my normal deadlifts, because they're just like, I mean, with stiff leg deadlifts, I use like 60 kgs less or something than on my normal deadlifts from the floor.
Yep. Luckily for bodybuilding, stiff leg deadlifts probably make at least as much sense as regular deadlifts.
I just will do them as long as I can progress them in my prep, and then I will pull them out and do another RDL session or something like that, or even stuff like deadlifts. One quick last thing, because we just talked about future overload. I think there is a pretty good quote from you in that Facebook post that I actually wanted to talk about, and it's that periodization calls for seeing each session and phase of your training, not just in terms of immediate benefits, but in how it sets up the rest of your program for success. And I think you somewhere mentioned in the podcast with Steve, it's been a while ago probably, that I'm not entirely sure what the quote was, but it was something in the realm of that. It's like in training, we always have to make sure to meet two conditions, and it's basically what do I have to stimulate growth now, and what am I doing next week to continue stimulating growth. And I just wanted to say that because I love it, and I think a lot of people will not get like really long-term gains over years and decades because they violate the second condition.
Thank you so much, Jan. It's interesting. I had an RP Plus is the service we offer at RP, where like $10 a month, you get to ask James Hoffman and I video questions like every week, and we answer them extensively in video. We had a new member ask us a very similar question. He says, he said he heard myself and Eric Helms talking about momentum and talking about like, if you can add 10 pounds to your squat next week and still hit the same reps, why only add 5 pounds, right? Why hold yourself back? And I had an opportunity to give that same answer you just quoted me from, which is, yeah, you can have a great session next week, but then what's the week after going to look like? You're going to get this much more stimulus than you would have, this much more fatigue. What if you just got this much stimulus, but this much fatigue, and next week you got this much stimulus, this much fatigue, you got 3 or 4 good weeks, now you're way bigger, you're way stronger. I think especially in hypertrophy training, it's about putting together many, many, many high-quality sessions. You're not ever going to grow so much muscle from one session that these amazing sessions are even worth it. Like these sessions where you go in and blast it. We fucking hit it, boys. We blasted legs. Like, all right, what are you going to do next week? Like, well, I got to deload. Like, wouldn't you deload every other week? Like, there's nothing there that is to be gained. And especially considering the following fact. If you do combat sports or if you do lifting, blasting it in one session gets you to this new level of accomplishment that you've never been to before and can let you operate at that new level of whether it be fatigue or capability, and it literally sets the bar higher for you permanently. With hypertrophy, you just grow a bit more muscle, but you take on a shitload of fatigue. There's no permanent higher level you're establishing that you couldn't get to just doing this. So with hypertrophy training, as boring as it may sound, should be meticulous, should be RIR instead of failure most of the time, and it should be concerned with future gain at least as much as it is with current gain.
Yeah, I think that was a great finish. So, Mike, thank you so much. I know you're much over your time, so appreciate it that you are here again. And I mean, if you want to, you can just quickly plug your stuff. I will definitely. I mean, I love RP Plus. I don't ask that much questions, to be honest. When I do, it's like 10 or so.
Sure.
And I get you pissed, so probably next week I will ask you some stuff about my current programming. And yeah, if you want to, just go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm always weird about plugging my shit. RP Dr. Mike on Instagram, Renaissance Periodization, or RP Strength on Instagram, RenaissancePeriodization.com. Mike Israetel on Facebook. I answer questions there on occasion. I post stuff. So if you want to follow me, that's cool. And yeah, that's all I have for now.
Cool. So thank you so much, and see you maybe in the next podcast.
Super.
Cool.